Hi everyone. We are going to talk about avoiding announcing types of language in your writing. This is another way to tighten your prose and make your writing more powerful. First of all, I'd like you to think about the difference between a verbal speech and a written essay. In a verbal speech, it's often acceptable to use different types of announcing language. For example, you might start out by saying, "This evening I plan to discuss such and such issue." Or you might say, "The first point I plan to make is," and those types of phrases can be acceptable for a speech. However, they're not acceptable for a written essay, and we're going to discuss why in a moment. So let's move on here to something you don't want to use to start your essay out with. When I was thinking about what to write for this essay, there's no need to tell readers about your preliminary thoughts before you dive into the content of your essay. Here's a couple of examples. When I was thinking about writing this essay, I wasn't sure what to write about. Then I decided to write about how Alamer's love for science cost him the only real thing he has in the world, true love. You can see there's a good thesis sentence there at the end of that paragraph. However, the first two lines are completely meaningless. They don't add anything to the information you're trying to share with readers about the essay. Let's look at a better example below. In Nathaniel Hawthorne's story, The Birthmark, the main character, Alamer, loves science more than all else, even his wife, and that love costs him the only real thing he has in the world, true love. This information here up top gives you much better information. It talks about the author and the title of the story you'll be discussing, and gives some other more contextual information that helps set up the delivery of that thesis statement. Here's another example of what you don't want to do. In this essay I'm going to tell you about, this is similar. You want to avoid that type of announcing language. You can go right into the content without telling readers that you're going to tell them about it. And as I said before, we can avoid this type of language. The first point I'm going to make is, or the second point I'm going to make is. If you go in and write about the point that you plan to make, readers are intelligent enough to realize that you are making a point. And if you have written it well, there's no need to announce this beforehand. Here's the same thing on a smaller scale. In this paragraph, I would like to discuss. So again, we don't need to announce that we're going to discuss something. Readers can see by having a visual of the paragraph on the page that you are discussing something. So there's no need to tell them that you are. Here's some examples of this one. In this paragraph, I would like to discuss that both characters take pride in forms of self-sacrifice they see as essential to upholding old world standards, versus just saying the sentence without that preliminary phrase there that really has no meaning at all. Sometimes these phrases can serve as transitions. However, these are not the type of transitions that you want to use. You want to make sure that your transitions are meaningful and add to the content of the essay. And these types of transitions are not meaningful. Here's another one. This quote shows that. You can tell readers what the quote shows without announcing that you're going to tell them. Once again, here's an example. The hunger artist's self-sacrifice is what keeps him motivated, yet no one is too impressed. The text notes he might fast as much as he could, and he did so, but nothing could save him now. People passed by him. Just try to explain the art of fasting. Anyone who is not feeling for it cannot be made to understand. This quote shows that the artist believes what he is doing is something special to behold. If you look at the example below, we've got the same setup here, but we're missing those three words this quote shows. Instead, it goes straight into the explanation afterwards. The artist believes what he is doing is something special to behold. There's no need for that preliminary announcement. This is another similar phrase. I think this quote is important because, and again, we can show readers the importance of a quote without announcing that we're going to before. And finally, this phrase, in conclusion. Now, in conclusion is a transition that people use. However, if you think about somebody looking and reading your essay, when they come to the final paragraph, they can see that it's the last paragraph of the essay. So they already know that it's a concluding paragraph. There is no need to put the in conclusion transition there. Instead, you could use a more meaningful transition by just examining ways to connect your language. Here's an example. Essentially, the hunger artist died, staying true to his beliefs. However, his refusal to change led to his demise. Now we have the concluding paragraph starting. It says, in conclusion, change is ever present. It is unavoidable and it is kinder to those who can accept it. So let's look at this bottom example and take that in conclusion transition out. Essentially, the hunger artist died, staying true to his beliefs. However, his refusal to change led to his demise. Now starting the conclusion. Change is ever present. It is unavoidable and it is kinder to those who can accept it. Now, this actually does transition nicely without the in conclusion transition beforehand, because we see this idea of change that ended the last paragraph, and it's picked up here in the next one and expanded upon. And this is an effective way to make a transition without adding this extra language that's not very meaningful. So I hope this helps you to understand about eliminating that announcing language. Please examine your essays for this and make sure to take it out and use some different types of connectors and meaningful language in your writing.